So the plan today is obviously we got a lot of snow that's coming down pretty heavy here midday. It's just started, which is a lot later than we thought. We've got our pre-treatment down. So our brine is on the pavement. That's there to cut the bond and keep the snow and ice from bonding to the pavement. Makes it easier for us to remove. So plow is going to be our main operation today. Really dealing with some warmer temperatures. So we'll have the plows out. They'll be out all day. They'll be out all night. All the city plows, which is about 110 pieces of equipment in the operation. We've got contractors coming in for our residential areas. Tentatively, those are scheduled to start at 3 o'clock, and that's generally, depending on the snowfall, that's a 12 to 24-hour operation for them. When they wrap up the areas, we'll get salt down in those residential streets. So we're plowing and treating the entire city today, and really just kind of looking forward to see how much snowfall comes down. A lot of change in the forecast. It's obviously come later. There's some rain mixing in at times. We do have warm temperatures today. The ground is relatively warm, but we do have snowfall rates that should be able to overwhelm some of those ground temperatures and will cause some accumulation that will be there to plow off.
What can you say about staffing heading into the storm? How are you staffed?
Staffing's good. We're I got asked that question last week. We're at our highest levels, proportion of staffing to budget that we've been in half a decade, and then overall numbers the highest ever, really, because we've increased some of those budget numbers. Mayor Stothard's been really good about giving us the resources that we need and making sure that we have proportionate pays to make sure that we get people in the door and that we can retain employees. And so staffing is really at the best level it's been in a long time.
You mentioned a number. Can you give us like a specific number? How many people are going to be out for like a shift?
Yeah, so we split our staff into 2 shifts. From the street maintenance operators that go out, there's about 100 per shift. And then we have support divisions that come in between our sewer maintenance, traffic division, parks department. We're looking at about an extra 25 per shift from those support groups. And that's and then we have obviously foremen and managers on top of that oversee the operations.
How do you describe this storm? We've had a couple so far this season. How do you describe this one?
It's a good question because every storm's different. You know, they all bring something different. I think we're going to see a lot of moisture, and we're really on that borderline of freezing, and so that moisture type could change. So obviously when it's snow, it's going to be very heavy wet snow, but the heavy wet snow tends to melt off faster, so our plow operations are super effective. We don't leave a whole lot behind, and warm temperatures really could remain through most of the night. So really, the colder temperatures would start more on Tuesday morning and then gradually drop at temperatures over Tuesday. Could create some icing situations after the fact and any moisture that's left on the pavement, but kind of a warm, heavy snow, really a lot more spring-like than what we would typically see in January, but heavy snow nonetheless.
So I want to get back to the neighborhoods. Is there a threshold for how much snow has to fall before you'd call in contractor plows?
Yeah, so we have a snow plan that identifies levels of service. Levels of service are based on what classification the street is. For our local or residential streets, we have a 2-inch level of service on that, so snowfall accumulating on the streets greater than 2 inches, the city provides service to that. Depending on the type of an operation, that could either be through city forces or through contractors. Typically it's going to be a contract force because we want to get those contractors in there as early as possible and make sure those streets are getting plowed. While city forces may be out on arterial and collector streets, but we want to be able to get early service to residential areas as well. But 2 inches is the threshold.
Also for neighbors, the sand barrels, in case there are icy spots. A lot of folks might not know about that.
Yep, we have a sand barrel program. Those requests we start taking requests October 1st. We take requests until December 1st. And so that's a mixture of salt and sand that goes out. Property owners only can request those, and those are communal. Okay, so it's a shared resource. So if you own a property and you request a sand barrel for your home, it has to meet a number of criteria. We don't put them on collector arterial streets. We do put them on residential streets. There does have to be a hill associated with that. So you put the barrel out. It goes in front of the property. We do tell people it will kill the grass where it sits over the winter, so that's one reason why the owner has to request it, because we know there's going to be some kind of property damage associated with that, and it's shared, so the neighbors can use that. It goes towards the street. It's not to be used on sidewalks, driveways, those kinds of things, but it's there to provide that neighborhood with some level of service that they can provide on their own prior to the city forces arriving.
Before we started up here, a couple of folks brought up the snow at Christmas. Did that event shape your response now? Were there any lessons from that or any tweaks that you felt like you could make to get you even more prepared for snow?
I mean, it's a great question. We learned from our snow, obviously, and so just things that happen from one storm to the next, we want to make sure that we take those lessons forward with us. Pretty light snow there that we had on Christmas. We didn't have a residential operation associated with that. So, but yeah, I mean, obviously we've got staff that's learning. We do have, we talked about staffing numbers. We're well staffed up. That obviously means we got a lot of new people that have come in from years past. So that training is very vital and important to us.
So would you say that those new staff members got some experience from that Christmas storm?
Yes.
How do you feel about this storm? You talked about what the plan is, the preparations, but how do you feel about the job?
It's a huge job. I always feel, there's always just a feeling of really service to the community. We always feel that, and we want to make sure that we take care of our citizens and our taxpayers the best we can. Safety is obviously very critical to what we do, and snow operations are just that. It's a safety issue. We want to make sure that people can safely use roads, sidewalks, and then we're out taking care of that to the best of our ability.
With the heavy snow today, heavy wet snow today, with the plungy temperatures tomorrow, what challenges does that create usually?
Yeah, and with it being warm to start, one of the key things is I talked about that bonding of the pavement that we talked about earlier. The warmer pavement doesn't tend to bond like that, so that's a little bit of a benefit to us. Usually when we see the end of accumulating snow or the plow goes by, we've got kind of a clear wet roadway with warmer temperatures, but then that water can then freeze overnight, and that's something that's a challenge we obviously have to look out for. As after dark temperatures fall, then we want to make sure that we get out there and go back and get salt down in those areas to keep that water from refreezing.
Are there any priority areas necessarily in the city?
Yeah, our priority streets are always our arterial streets, and then followed by our collector streets. So we go off a hierarchy of the street network, as opposed to we don't separate this part of town versus that part of town. Our forces are divided into 5 equal districts. We have the same number of resources per lane mile in each of those districts. We have drivers, foremen, everything is really pretty much equivalent citywide in the way that we serve those areas. And so we go through our street hierarchy from that point.
Okay.
What is your plan for Monday and Tuesday on the heels of this system? We've got another one.
You talk about, Thursday I think is the next one that I
sure.
saw come
Yeah.
in. So we've got Thursday to think about before that. A couple of things with this snow. It looks like we're probably going to have heavy enough snow that in a lot of our select downtown locations, we could be windrowing that snow to the middle of the street. So we could have some closed lanes there. Obviously with downtown and on-street parking, with metered parking, we clear those stalls, we pile it to come back and pick up later. So we'll have extensive pickup operations in both the windrows and in the parking areas downtown. That could run into the Thursday snow as well. And so that's kind of the back and forth balancing act that we continue to play. And we'll keep an eye on that and come up with a plan as we need to.
I don't know if odd even parking is one of the reminders or not, but are there?
So you're talking about the emergency snow regulations and the emergency
or
parking
any other
regulations.
reminders that
The
you
city
share?
has not declared an emergency snow parking, a snow emergency yet for emergency parking regulations. It's not very likely with this storm that we would. But what that does is that would change, obviously, you talk about the even odd system where if you have an even address at your home, you park there on even days of the week. If it's odd, then you switch over to the odd side. We try not to use those unless the timing really lines up right, because a couple of things that does is, number one, our compliance is really low with those. We typically see very little compliance with that regulation. We start to issue tickets. Obviously, that becomes problematic for some people. And then obviously it slows our operation, because now we're waiting for the calendar to change before we go back, when in a regular operation we finish up and we go. So that's why we look at the timing. If things time up right to where that midnight is a reasonable time for a shift, we'll go in and do that. In cases like this, it's not the case.
Are there other reminders? You'd say we get through this better when folks remember these things.
The reason why we have the parking regulations in the first place is it's always easier to clear to the curb if there's not a car parked here. So anybody who can park off of the street has the ability to do that. I would encourage that. I know there are certain areas of town where that's not possible, but if people live in a part of town where they have the availability and can park off of the street during a snowstorm, we always prefer that.
So who actually makes the call on the snow emergency? Is it your department? Is it a couple departments?
Technically, it's the mayor. We obviously give our feedback to that. We make that recommendation, and so that would get announced through the mayor's office.
What's the penalty to people who could park off the street or don't face on the lane?
It's if an emergency is called and someone is ticketed for not parking appropriately, it's $50.
$50.
What are the priority streets again?
Arterial streets and collector streets.
Can you give us an example of what I'm talking about?
Example of arterial street would be Dodge Street, 144th Street. Those are big main arterial streets. 72nd Street, obviously. Collector streets are more your neighborhood collectors. They'll serve your schools, your civic sites, churches, those kinds of things. Good examples of collector streets would be like Country Club Avenue. Be a good example of a collector street. A few others like, I'm trying to think, there's a few good examples I could come up with in Miller, and I can't, they're not coming to mind right now, but they're more neighborhood streets. You know, the idea behind that is if you live obviously in a neighborhood street, you shouldn't have to go more than a couple of blocks to get to that collector, that arterial street, to where you can then get out and travel more freely.
We appreciate you giving us this update. For the people who get to stay at home tonight, you guys have a hard job ahead on nights like this. You and your staff have to. How late are you guys staying up during an event like this?
It's around the clock, so it's a 24-hour operation at this point.
How do you feel about what's coming down so far?
So obviously it's been wet, so there's really nothing that's accumulated on the streets at this point, other than we did have a little bit of some freezing drizzle earlier this morning, so that was fairly easy to treat because it wasn't very widespread. But right now we're focusing on the plows.
Do you already have them out and in place? I've seen a lot
Yes.
of like state units that are already on shoulders.
Yep. In fact, about an hour ago I looked out my window and saw a plow truck downtown, so we're out.
Is there a place where we can go to get video of plows right now?
Yeah, they're all over town. I mean, again, our priority is going to be on those arterial streets, so usually they're going to be making passes every 20 minutes to half hour on arterial streets.
Do you have any budget figures? I think you mentioned that you have a highest proportion, decade between budget and staffing. I mean, do you have any figures?
Yeah, I didn't bring those numbers to this meeting, but you're welcome to look online at our budget.
Okay, and just was there an emphasis to getting sure they got staffing at least to get to his level?
Yeah, obviously that's been a push for us, and it's been, it hasn't been as much adding those positions to the budget, Dan, as it has been just to fill the positions. We had a lot of vacancies in the positions, and so just dealing with workforce and staffing, that's been the primary issue.
Thank you.